Okay, this is Carrie Cassidy and Robert Morningstar, and we're about to start. As usual, I've had some anomalous things going on with one of my computers here, so I've had to switch computers. We're starting here and going live. We've had some interesting anomalous things go on right before the start of the show. Uh, not sure why. My other computer is not working properly, so I had to go to this computer. The angle is a bit strange, so it's one of those situations where I need to raise it up and all that kind of stuff, which I'll do while I get you talking, Robert. So Robert Morningstar is, the editor of UFO Digest, and I believe, he's quite well known at this point. I've had him on several shows, and I guess a writer, an investigator into the Kennedy assassination. I think that's one of the things you're most known for. And rather a sort of specialist in some ways when it comes to, I guess, I don't know, occult knowledge and perhaps the Illuminati. I'm not sure how you'd classify yourself. So, Robert, why don't you give yourself an introduction that is much better than the one I just gave you while I shift things around
Oh,
here?
I thought that was a good one. Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Robert Morningstar. I'm an investigative journalist and a radio reporter. I have an expertise in several fields. One of my principal tools in investigation is use of geometry, sacred geometry, and geometrical analysis and proofs. Most of my work in the Kennedy assassination involves geometric proofs. For example, that the skull X-rays are not President Kennedy's, which has been proven by other experts, including Dr. David Mantik, or most notably Dr. David Mantik. I study history, mythology, psychology is my field, and it's been my vehicle expanding my consciousness and trying to understand this world in which we live. And a large part of that is studying the relationship between, because the mythology of one generation is the history of another. And the history of another civilization evolves into the religion of another civilization. There's a molting process in ideas, and each tries to understand the world, both the material world and the mystical world, in concepts that are most familiar to them. So tonight I want to discuss ET origins of religions. I would like to begin at the beginning, which is, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth was void and without form. And God said, "Let there be light." The question is, where was God standing? Obviously, he wasn't standing on solid ground. My answer is that the Creator created the universe from another dimension. And that creation process is what we call the Big Bang. But there was an antecedent state to the Big Bang of light in the universe, which was a singularity. The way I describe the universe before the creation of light is an infinite expanse of nothing, of darkness, that had no other attributes other than a certain different density in one region of the universe. Call it a lump in the dark. And from this point, this lump in the dark, universal pressures were generated that kindled a fire and that fire was being suffused by a counter force until the forces both grew so great that they could no longer stay or remain in that antecedent state. And at that point, there was a rupture in realities. From another dimension, there streamed into these dimensions an energy flux that had consciousness, awareness, will, intention, identity, and this universe began to unfold. But it is a multidimensional universe with an intermittent nature to its beat. And this rhythm of the universe is actually a pulse of life, which was generated at the beginning of time and streamed out and continues to stream out into the universe, propagating life and light and life wherever it reaches. And it has not reached its ultimate destination. In the Christian world, these ideas are as alpha and omega. The alpha point being the beginning of time, the creation, and the omega point being that toward which the universe is moving, striving, evolving. Now, when we come to the recent history, that's cosmic history. Recent history, as I look at the world today, it's by each manipulating their followers into a belief system which excludes all the others. Now, these religions, the main three main religions that I'm talking about, are Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And in each of these religions, I discern intervention of celestial beings that are called angels, devils, demons, watchers, sons of God, fallen angels, and individual names as well. And I believe that all of these entities are operating in a cosmic war, vying for the earth as a resource and for humanity, our minds and our souls, domination of our thinking, imposition of alien ideas upon our humanity that is making us less like us and more like them. In each of the religions, I discern an alien intervention. We use the term extraterrestrials. It means not of terra, extra terra, out of this world, not of this earth. And I propose that angels, demons, jinns, God himself is an extraterrestrial. Ghosts are extraterrestrial. All of them are part of a multidimensional existence that shares the same space but not at the same time. That's why I was referring before to this beat, this intermittent beat, this on and off fluctuation, a flickering reality. That is what I believe. We're here, and then we're not here, then we're back. Then we're not here, then we're back. And only in that intermittent binary state can things unfold. If things were constant, everything would be static. There would be no motion. But it's only because the universe fluctuates from the material to the immaterial that we see change happen. And the change, the real change, occurs in the interaction of ideas and energies the non-material state, which cause small changes that make the world congeal in a slightly different form the next time it's on. So this is my idea of the intermittent universe.
Okay,
We are,
Robert, I appreciate
yeah,
that, and thank you for that. No, I think you know
right.
you lay that out very nicely. Let me say that at this
For
moment,
time.
it's just crazy, and why this is going on like this, I don't know. I do want to say that that people might have missed what we just talked about, and I don't know. I'm trying to see if maybe from the chat if someone can put into the chat where how long we've been gone, because we did get knocked off.
Are we back on now?
Yes, we
Okay.
appear to be online again. Um, so what I had done was addressed what Robert had said in regard to this sort of phenomena of blinking in and out, and the notion that we are as multidimensional, actually blinking out of this reality and into another one when we appear to be blinking in and out as physicists see us or see this timeline. So we are moving between timelines and dimensions simultaneously, and all time is simultaneous anyway. So you have to work that into your sort of concept about what's really going on here. And when we talk about religion, I guess this is no other. There's it's a perfectly valid place to to start that kind of a discussion. Robert, you and I had just started this conversation as I was telling people, and we were talking about the Kennedy assassination. He was on his way to Dallas, and according to my witness, Mark Richards, was actually going to spill the beans at that conference in Dallas where he was about to
At the
do a
trade farm.
speech.
Yes. Yes, I have heard that many times from several different sources. I've heard that he shared the contents with Governor Connolly, and that he was planning to reveal the extraterrestrial presence on operating on the planet at that speech, and that that was the single most important reason why he had to be stopped from giving that speech. Since we're talking about President Kennedy and UFOs, I'd like something that's very, very interesting. President Kennedy was a member of the Office of Naval Intelligence. And during World War II, as everyone knows, he was stationed on PT boats. Now, despite the movie, they were expendable with PT boats going out and sinking cruisers and battleships and all of that. In reality, the PT boat was more a spy vessel than anything else. And that was what President Kennedy was involved in at the time of PT 52 and P-109, 109 being the more famous of the two. But the important thing is that President Kennedy was stationed on Guadalcanal, and it was around the waters of Guadalcanal that he had his disastrous shipwreck when his PT boat was cut in two by a Japanese destroyer that didn't even know it had hit him in a totally black moonless night. But the interesting thing is this, that I discovered about 10 years ago. The people of Guadalcanal, for over 100 years, have had this local legend of something called the dragonfish. The dragonfish is a light, a brilliant light that is seen to come out of the waters and go into the waters around the northern end of Guadalcanal. And from the waters, it moves into the highlands of Guadalcanal. And natives that have been brave enough to go chasing them have often come back injured. They are hostile. They were hostile. And the legend of the dragonfish has been in and around Guadalcanal for 100 years. And I believe that that is where President Kennedy may first have had experiences with UFOs. The second experience that President Kennedy had with UFOs was being briefed 2 or 3 days after the Roswell crash about the event, the findings, the craft, the alien bodies. And for this reason, he was put on a watch list by the Central Intelligence Group of the United States Army. He was put on the list as people who had learned of the event without having been cleared to know about the event. Are you still there?
Yes, I am. Please
Okay.
ignore. Apparently, my camera's not working now on Skype. So
Okay.
just normal craziness going on behind the scenes here. Continue.
Oh, sure. Let me tell the audience, UFO Digest has been knocked off the internet for the third time this year. And it's very curious that the last time that we were knocked off and knocked was the day after I had published Stephen Bassett's open letter to Hillary Clinton on UFO disclosure, detailing her relationship with Lawrence Rockefeller and the UFO disclosure initiative that was in gear since 1994. So right after we published that, Mrs. Clinton had to appear before the Benghazi Committee, and we were out for 8 days. And now we've been out for 3 days. What were we publishing recently? Let's see. 35th anniversary of the assassination of John Lennon. A postscript to the Manchurian Candidate, in which I reveal the fingerprints of MKUltra in the casting of the movie to prepare us for the assassination of President Kennedy. If I might just touch on this point for a moment. In 1996, I decided to review all the major assassination films of the last 40 years. And those films are 1954 film called with Frank Sinatra, The Manchurian Candidate with Frank Sinatra, The Day of the Jackal, and Behold a Pale Horse with Gregory Peck. Now, I had been watching The Manchurian Candidate for 33 years. And every time that I saw the film, I said to myself, this makes no sense. Why did they cast an English actor play an American Marine in this film when there are thousands of American actors, many of them ex-Marines, who could have played this role? Why choose Lawrence Harvey, a Lithuanian-born Englishman, to play this role? And for 33 years, I thought, much as I liked the film, I saw it a score of time.
Great.
So in this study now, in 1996, I was no longer just watching the movie. I was studying the movie, and especially because I had learned by then that President Kennedy had wanted that film made, had helped John Frankenheimer get support for the film, for the making of the film. But then there's always this tragic, and it created this little disturbance. It's called cognitive dissonance, and we experience it repeatedly in the JFK assassination, studying the so-called evidence, the tampered photos, the doctored photos. It leaves you with a sense of something's not right. So here I am in 1996 reviewing the film for the umpteenth time, and the titles are unfolding, starring Frank Sinatra, Janet Leigh, James Gregory, Leslie Parrish, and introducing as Raymond Shaw, Lawrence Harvey. And then I had an epiphany. When his name appeared, I saw the L get bold and big. I saw the A-U-R get small. I saw the E get big. I saw the N and the C get small. And I saw the second E get big. And I read, Lee Harvey. And I had a shock. Embedded in Lawrence Harvey's name is the name Lee Harvey.
Fascinating.
So in 1962, this movie was being made, casting a Lithuanian-born English actor who would leave you to the little funny feeling like, what, something ain't right about this, you know? What's his name? Lawrence Harvey. All right? So now, a year later, President Kennedy's killed, and they pull a rabbit out of the hat, and it says, oh, it's Lee Harvey. And everybody goes, that sounds right. I don't know why, but that sounds right. Because MKUltra had massaged millions of minds for over a year the audiences who went to see the Manchurian Candidate and had received what I call a mind massage, little hollow spaces in the mind, in the subconscious mind, that make ideas more receptible. They're willing to believe it a little more because the mind has been conditioned, prepared to accept it or to induce it to accept it. So that's one instance. Now, when we talk about mind control, we're talking about alien technology. Alien mind control is one of the most important elements and fearsome elements of the UFO mystery. And it's operant also in religion, in religious. We human beings, some of us have this gene called the VMAT-2 gene, VMAT-2. And those who have this gene are hardwired to have spiritual and mystical experiences more readily than people who don't have the VMAT-2 gene, let's say, awakened. I found out about this a couple of years ago because a video was leaked where purportedly a lecturer was giving the Pentagon trying to get funding for an aerosol dispersed virus which would attack the VMAT-2 gene and kill people's capacity to believe or have mystical experiences. So the idea was they have developed this gene factor that when breathed in would enter the person's circulatory system and then start to distribute itself and start to turn off the VMAT-2 gene and its circuitry so that people would not believe in anything. They'd basically lose faith or erase their faith. And it's a kind of a wild idea, typical of the things that, the Pentagon, the CIA would conceive of.
Okay, and where can you
spray the Middle East, for example, and get rid of ISIS?
Well,
because they stop believing in what they believe in.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can now.
Okay, good. Just double checking on that. Okay, I wanted to ask you, when do you think they released that sort of the blocking gene?
Oh, I don't believe it's been released. I don't believe it's been released, but the video that I saw was a proposal for funding.
I see.
Which was supposed to have taken place around 2008, 2009.
Okay. Well, I mean, in other words,
then it disappeared.
You don't know whether it's been released, is the real answer.
I don't know whether it's been released. I know that they were asking for funding, and apparently at the end of the video that was shown, the company members were very happy because apparently they had received an initial grant.
Okay, I think it looks like my camera's frozen regardless of how I do anything here. And it's interesting because I'm supposed to have a specially fast connection that I pay for here. and so we're constantly having weird anomalous things go on. In the beginning of the night, I couldn't get us online at all. And we've already been thrown off once. So,
yeah, well, listen, we have... we have friends and we have enemies.
Yeah.
And I was talking to Brad Steiger, or emailing with Brad. He's one of our greatest writers at UFO Digest. And he said, those are going to get a big lump of coal for Christmas. And I said to him, I've resigned myself that it goes with the territory, but I'm happy to quote Winston Churchill. Here's some feedback there. Anyway, Winston Churchill said, "So you have enemies? Good. It shows that you stood up for something sometime in your life."
Well, I think they say if you're not over the target, you're not taking any flack type of thing. So I do appreciate that.
But
Uh,
another thing, let me say, we have a lot of supporters in the military, in all the services, and I have a very deep and abiding respect for all of them. And one of them wrote to me from Europe and said, I want you to know that the United States Army has blocked UFO Digest on our U.S. Army bases and our U.S. Army computers. We cannot access UFO Digest on the network.
yeah, I get these kind of notes about Camelot as well. This is fascinating. These bits and pieces of things that you find out, like the Lee Harvey Oswald and the Harvey, the actor Lawrence Harvey. Fascinating synchronicity. Obviously, that is no coincidence at all, and shows what they might say is malice of forethought.
Yes, exactly. Yes, indeed.
So, to coin a phrase there. So what, in terms of the ET, when we got into this discussion, what I wanted to really drill down with is how religion, even at this time, is influenced, obviously, by its roots. And all of the great religions have some truth, but all of them, if I'm not mistaken, have been sidetracked and taken over,
Yeah.
and show the mark of interference with, again, malice of forethought. And I believe Islam is certainly no exception to that. And
Well, I
Christianity.
know a little more about that hijacking than most people do.
All right.
And
So
it's one
maybe
of
you
the
could talk
topics that
about
I
that.
wanted to touch on. But I put out a notice about this program, and that I said that I would be discussing the Dead Sea Scrolls and angels and angelology. And the Dead Sea Scrolls is the most important religious document of the 20th century, and it was quashed for 50 years until the monopoly was broken by an archivist in San Marin, California. The Huntington Library released slides of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they were published, the Dead Sea Scrolls Uncovered, in 1996. I got my copy and began studying them, and my eyes were open to the reasons why they were quashed. The Dead Sea Scrolls show conclusively that the practice of Christianity was antecedent to the practice of what was being practiced in the Holy Land were various interpretations of Hebraism or Hebrewism. Each of the 12 tribes took the Torah and lived the Torah in each of the 12 tribes' ways. And some of these tribes moved on, disappeared, so-called lost tribes, and other tribes grew strong and other tribes grew weaker until the Pharisees became the dominant tribes in Judea and Israel. The Essenes lived apart from the general urbanized polyglot cultures that were in the Holy Land at the time, and they were living in very strict adherence to the Torah, and developed basically their own culture and their own organizational structure. And that organizational structure is basically the what is called Episcopal, not Episcopalian. Episcopal means something run by bishops, and they had a term called a Mekabar, who was the bishop of the local groups, local units. And they also had a very interesting name for the teacher of righteousness, and that was called the Nazi. He was called the Nazi. And I thought, isn't this amazing that the Dead Sea Scrolls call the teacher of righteousness Nazi, and then the National Socialist German Workers' Party comes down with the acronym Nazi for their movement. just another interesting synchronicity. The most interesting thing to me about the Dead Sea Scrolls is the revelation of the presence of angels in Qumran. And they're coming and going to and from Qumran on what they call the chariots of glory. There is also almost an description of there is an explicit description of the Holy of Holies, the tabernacle, in the center of the Qumran community, where angels were coming to have intercourse with Essene women. And it's my belief that there was a very long-standing, ongoing genetic breeding program or hybriding program between angels and that the upshot was the birth of John the Baptist and Jesus of Nazareth, who came forth to seed this new religion, the religion of love God above all things and love your neighbor as yourself, which was a radical breakaway from every other religion that had existed antecedent to it, with the exception of Mo-Tzu in China, Mo-Tzu was in the line of the Taoist sages, Lao Tzu, Chuang Tzu, and Mo-Tzu. And Mo-Tzu preached universal love. And in that, he's very much on the same wavelength as Jesus
Robert,
of Nazareth.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, you broke up on the word. You said Lao Tzu.
Lao Tzu, Lao Tzu,
No,
Chuang Tzu.
I think Mo-Tzu. You were saying
Mo-Tzu.
There's a Mo-Tzu. Preached what?
Universal love.
Okay.
The other thing is the interaction of angels and humans in the Torah, in the Gospels, and in the Quran. And the one angel that appears in all three is the angel Gabriel, a very mysterious fellow. In the Old Testament, it's given that the angel Gabriel appeared to Daniel and gave him the prophecy of the 70 weeks, the battle at the end of time, the Armageddon battle. That's one description. Then the angel Gabriel appears to Mary and to Elizabeth and announces that they are going to have special children and that Mary will bear the Son of God. The Muslims have an interesting tradition in describing the conception of Jesus. They say that the angel Gabriel blew the God into the ear.
Actually, you just lost a lot of volume. I guess you hit your mic or moved your mic or something. Could you perhaps adjust it slightly? Try to.
Sure, I think it was the mouse. I didn't touch the mic, actually.
Okay.
How's that? Is that better?
A bit, yes.
Okay, so the angel Gabriel, according to the Muslim tradition, blew the word of God with a trumpet into the ear of the Blessed Virgin. Now, think of the idea. Used a trumpet to blow the word of God into Mary's ear. I think that is a pretty explicit description of artificial insemination. If you take the ear to be the vagina, and the trumpet to be the tube, and the word to be the genetic code, then it's very clear to me that what we're talking about in the Muslim description of the Annunciation, artificial insemination. So I think that there's a very high probability that Jesus Christ was the Son of God, cross, hybrid man from woman, and Holy Spirit, whoever Holy Spirit is. The demigods of ancient Greece, the same story. They proceed from Zeus. Zeus, Jupiter, Jove, all the way down to Earth to frolic, to carry off beautiful earth women, and to give birth to the demigods. Castor and Pollux, Helen of Troy, they were triplets. Hercules, Jason, Perseus. The list goes on. So that, again, Olympian gods, to me, are extraterrestrials. Then we have the Greys. And so the Greys fall into this category that certainly they are not gods, demigods, or sons of God. They seem to be in the category of fallen angels or messengers. And they obviously, now that we have 70 years of research behind us and reports of CE3, CE4, and CE5, direct contact and all the way to sexual intercourse. Most of the time we have sexual intercourse, the abduction of women, the implantation of hybrids, and the taking away of the hybrid. However, there is a long, long list of men who have been taken. And in that case, the messenger, the angel, the Grey, abducts the man and basically acts as a parasite. It leeches, they will leech both blood and semen from the man and take it off for their experiments. So I believe that there is a mass deception being conducted by extraterrestrials who are here to, a large group of them is here for nefarious reasons, to undo man, to usurp our position as the dominant species on this planet, to fool us into wars with one another, which is actually in the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch relates this amazing account that it should fit into chapter 2 of Genesis. You know, the breeding of the giants, the men of renown. Chapter 2 has another volume which is called the Book of Enoch, which is a totally explicit and detailed description of the descent of extraterrestrials to the earth. They're called the Watchers. They were supposed to be watching this, us, watching mankind develop and evolve. They were not supposed to interfere, but for some reason they seem to have gotten lonely, and they seem to have gotten a desire for intercourse with women and the desire to procreate, to propagate their angelic nature. What they didn't know is that by breaking the prime directive, by cohabitating with women and inseminating them, they lost their heavenly nature. What they did not know is that because they were the holy ones, they were in constant telepathic spiritual communication with the Godhead, with God himself. What they didn't know is that that existed until it was ripped away from them. They lost a huge amount of their consciousness. When they sinned, the Spirit of God moved away from them. It left them. Their souls just took it. And they crashed. And there is crashing in the sense like a drug addict crashes, like a cocaine addict or a heroin addict crashes when they don't have it. Well, that's what happened to the Watchers. And they are in utter misery, way up crying, suffering, bemoaning their fates. And they ask, because they've lost the consciousness, the high consciousness, the God consciousness that they didn't even know they had until it was stripped away from them. And they ask Enoch to intercede with God, because Enoch was a righteous and most perfect man on earth, and so God walked with Enoch and took him. So they ask Enoch to intercede on their behalf for forgiveness, and so Enoch goes and speaks to the Lord, and the Lord says, no, they will be forgiven. No, for till the end of time, they will not be forgiven. And he summons Michael, Gabriel, Phanuel, and Raphael, and he directs them to come to the earth to subdue the Watchers and to put an end to the evil that they have propagated. Because what had happened is the children of the Watchers had become tyrants and giants and so much stronger and smarter than normal, ordinary human beings that they started to look upon human beings as a lower animal and even started to consume them. They became, well, we would call it cannibalistic, eating human beings. The giants didn't consider it cannibalism, they just considered it good hunting. So these terribles are going on. Interestingly, in the Egyptian tradition, the same thing is happening with Isis and Osiris and Seth and Typhon. Seth and Typhon start to consume mankind as well. So we have this parallel story of a hybrid gods, demigods turning against humans, and the Lord sending rescue in the form of 4 angels. But what he says to the angels is very interesting. He says to Michael, Gabriel, Phanuel, and Raphael that they are to take Azazel and Samsa and their minions and bury them deep in the earth, on their backs facing upwards, cover them with stones so the sunlight should never reach, but in the position of looking up so they can see through the earth. Even though sunlight can never reach them, they can see through the earth. So that God says, let the Watchers see their children decimated. Bring the children of the Watchers into wars with one another until they all destroy themselves.
Yeah, but this is, let me just interrupt here, because you are repeating what is in the book of Enoch, no doubt.
Yes,
but
that's
it's
right.
important to understand who God is in this scenario, because God is not what we think of as the creator, in my estimation. What we're talking about here is an Anunnaki God who has placed himself in a position of being God, who is vindictive and wreaks vengeance, and has a certain point of view that is not necessarily the point of view of the true creator. So, okay, go ahead.
I agree. He's a tyrant. He himself says, I am a jealous God.
And this is the Jewish God, unfortunately.
Yeah,
that is often referred to, and mistaken, also in sort of internalized by a lot of Christians that like to use the word sin for things like procreation or whatever you want to call it, sex. In other words, this is a point of view of the Anunnaki, because the Anunnaki became threatened by man and wanted to, the whole battle between Enki and Enlil, in which Enlil wanted humans to be dumbed down, and so indeed they did put a frequency fence of a sort.
Well, we're on the topic of the Anunnaki. I would like to recommend a book to listeners. It's called The Anunnaki of Nibiru by Gerald Clark, and I think it is the most succinct and scholarly exposition of the Anunnaki mythology and history.
Yeah, I've been reading that book, actually.
I heard him speak with John Wells, and in half an hour he made me see the big picture. It's quite a fine book, and well, let me just read the whole title because it'll tell you the whole scheme that we're suffering here. The Anunnaki of Nibiru, mankind's forgotten creators, enslavers, destroyers, saviors, and hidden architects of the New World Order. That says it all.
Right.
They imposed a system of thinking and an organizational system which became dominant and also very aggressive in spreading itself. And it has given rise to civilizations. Civilizations fall, but they rebuild along the same design and using the same building blocks. However, man is not a creature who was designed to submit. Man is a creature who has an innate sense of himself and the desire to be free. And when religions are imposed upon people by force, the soul and the mind knows that they aren't free. At this moment, I'd like to just take a sidestep into modern times and modern politics with the problem that we have with Islamic fundamentalism and jihadism and the various tactics that are being recommended for dealing with it. Donald Trump has recommended the banning of Muslims from entering the United States until this situation is resolved and until the Muslim people rise enough and start to speak against this evil that has been engendered in their midst. Now, people think that that's racist. I would like to point out that in 1952, the United States Senate and Congress passed an immigration bill called the McLaren Act, which banned Muslims from coming to the United States because they recognized in 1952 people who were more clear-sighted and realistic. They realized that Islam is a form of government that imposes a religion. It is not a religion alone. And that wherever the religion goes, the religion demands that they impose that form of government on any territory in which they live. So that is the key. Islam is a form of government that imposes a religion on all submissives.
Well, I mean, I think that can be argued. Certainly Islamic scholars would probably disagree with you. One could say that every religion out there is a form of institutionalized coercion, even basically rulership over humanity. And so that when you have Moses and I guess Muhammad and others telling humans, you literally have them saying, you must do this, you must do that, you must pray at this time of day, and you must wash at this time of day.
True.
And in other words,
it's behavior, control of population and behavior.
Yeah, it's a social framework by which
but who's telling them to do that?
Control.
Remember, but who is telling them ultimately? Where are those orders coming from? Moses is coming from the burning bush. Muhammad is coming through the angel Gabriel and from Allah.
Right.
Jesus, he's channeling the Heavenly Father and a God of love. The interesting thing for me is in the God that Jesus came to establish. It seems like a revolution, no less so than our American Revolution against the King of England, to establish another kingdom altogether. It seems to me that Jesus came and he disenfranchised Yahweh. He just said, no, God is not a God of hate and anger and revenge. God is God of love. And in that I see a complete turnaround and really a totally different identification of the God from Yahweh to the Holy Father or the Heavenly Father.
I appreciate that, but it is important that if we're going to discriminate in terms of religion here in the United States, which goes against our Constitution, by the way, then it behooves us to go across the board. And fundamentalist Christians are no less dangerous than fundamentalist Muslims. And let me say that the fact is that the people that are committing these acts are most often on the payroll of the CIA, which means that we've got a whole different layer going on. This is not Muslims acting completely independently and on their own. In most cases, surely you don't think that 9/11 was done by some Arabs with box cutters that were
I want to see the 28 pages that relate to the Saudi influence on those box cutters.
Well, perhaps.
I believe that Saudi Arabia and other powers in the Middle East had a lot to do and a lot to gain by bringing down the towers creating the wars.
Well, I mean,
Who benefited? Who
who
benefited most?
benefited? The New World Order benefited.
Right.
You know, the Saudis actually only by default benefited, and really not that much. I mean, the bottom line is that these people were on the CIA payroll. I mean, we
I
know
agree.
this. And then what is the origin of the CIA? It's the Nazis. So you
The
have to go
Nazis,
back
right?
to the OSS. So if we're going to ban somebody from being allowed in our country, then maybe we should be looking at banning really all the paperclip scientists and all the Nazis that we allowed
It's a
in,
little late for that.
and who've taken over our government. And
What
if you
is
read this,
necessary is to purge from the government the operators who are still conducting that Nazi program. I describe that takeover as, the Nazis taught us how they did things, and the program was accepted. And it's like a mad scientist who invents a robot that replicates itself, and then the mad scientist dies, but the robot keeps replicating itself.
life again. Uh, so I'm going to say what I was saying right before we may do so. I do want to get this to discriminate are to their religion. This is also at that much responsible. Now there is a certain that, especially on the fundamental, that read the Bible and by men and men had agendas, as you were even are some like that, but
Not some parts, many parts.
there are many parts in the Bible
Jihad.
in
Oh yeah, listen, let me tell you about Moses.
same thing.
Let me just tell you about Moses. I had a really interesting experience with a professor, PhD in religion from Hunter College many years ago, in this very room. It was my birthday, and he happened to be a grandmaster in chess, and I love to play chess. And we start talking religion, and I said to him, well, there's so much propaganda and example that scene in the Ten Commandments, that golden calf scene, that's total BS. There was, okay, we've gotten cut off. Are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, because I got a notice that we were cut off. Anyway, I said to this professor, that scene in the golden calf scene where Moses takes the tablets and throws them, and the earthquake comes and the lightning kills, that's total. And he says, what are you talking about? And he says, I said, it's in the Torah. And he said, show me. So I went over, and I have a 1946 Torah that was given to me by my dearest friend. It was his brother's Torah. And we were almost like brothers. We are brothers. He gave it to me. He didn't want it. So it became my source. And I opened up to Exodus and to the golden calf scene, the golden calf rebellion. And I gave him the passage, and it says in the passage that the way that Moses put down the rebellion of the golden calf is that he got all of his men together, and they killed 3,000 people in one night. And when I put it in his hand and he read it, he was shocked, and he said to me, do you know what this means? I didn't know what he was going to say. I said, no, what? He says, this means Moses was a terrorist. But he said, they never taught us this in shul. He said, I know. You have to read all of the sources.
Sure. One man's
Here's
terrorist
another
is
thing. Let me
another
just, since I'm
man's
talking
freedom
about the Ten
fighter,
Commandments.
and you do know that saying, yes?
Pardon me?
One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. You've heard
Yes,
that
indeed.
saying?
Yes, exactly. Sure. But the other thing I was going to say about this thing about hijacking religions for political purposes, one of the most important films of the 20th century, geopolitically speaking, was the Ten Commandments, starring Charlton Heston, because the purpose of that movie creates something called Judeo-Christianity. Judeo-Christianity did not exist before the 1950s. There was Judaism, there was Christianity, and they were separate and antagonistic. But because of the threat of global communism, this bridge had to be built between Judaism and Christianity to amalgamate the spiritual power of those two religions to coordinate in order to fight off godless, atheistic material. This bridge had to be created, and that bridge was Judeo-Christianity. So in the Ten Commandments, this is where the bridge is made by Cecil B. DeMille. And every time I see that film, even to this day, I am amazed at not just the opening of the Red Sea, the Exodus, where it seems like 10,000 people are gathering outside Thebes, ready to take that march out. Donkeys, cows, bulls, hundreds of sheep, hundreds of geese, all of these costumes. And every time I saw the film, I was amazed and said, where did they get those extras? How could they outfit those costumes and get all of the, the animal husbandry that was necessary to gather that scene of leaving Egypt? So in 2007 was the 50th anniversary of the film. So I got this special DVD that had the film itself, and then it had a narration of the making of the Ten Commandments. Every scene is described how it was done. It gets to the Exodus scene, and the narrator, a woman who wrote a book called The Making of the Ten Commandments, says, part of the Hebrews was played by Bedouin and Bedouin tribesmen that were recruited by the Egyptian government to play the Hebrews. And I said to myself, oh my God, what happened? What happened? The relationship between Jews and Muslims was so good in 1954 that King Farouk, I believe he was the last king of Egypt, supported the government. The government supported the making of the film, The Ten Commandments, with Cecil B. DeMille shooting in Egypt, going into the Sinai, and the Egyptian government got the Fedayeen, fearsome desert warriors, and the Bedouins to play the Hebrews, and they had no qualms about playing Hebrews or Jews in the film. What went wrong? What went wrong was the Soviet Union hijacked Islam and the Palestinian movement to create tension between with the United States and to vie for domination of the Middle East, and thereby hijacking it through Yasser Arafat, their spiritual leader, who was educated in Moscow and then sent back to Palestine, Egypt, Gaza, to marshal the Palestinian movement toward on the Soviet side. So governments have an interest in religions for geopolitical reasons. One of the interesting things, and I mentioned Hillary Clinton's relationship with Lawrence Rockefeller and their interest in UFOs. UFOs could be the basis of a new religion. Rockefeller has always been interested in controlling religion. There is a book called A Certain Arrogance by Professor George Michael Evika, and it's about the JFK assassination of Lee Harvey Oswald and how Lee Harvey Oswald was recruited and nurtured through Lutheran Church organizations, and the Lutheran Church sponsored his trip to the Soviet Union. But in reality, these churches were fronts for the Rockefeller organization and
Actually,
spying apparatus
I just did
as
an
well.
interview with,
Yes, I am familiar with
and
Peter.
we talked about that exact thing.
And it goes back to the Indian Wars. This book by Professor George Michael Avica is a real eye-opener. Not just on that topic, but on the topic of the military-industrial complex and who were the really big players in the engineering and the fashioning of the military-industrial complex. And it turns out that James Webb, director of NASA, was the principal engineer of the military-industrial complex. It was he who had been in charge of the Office of Budget and Management since the Roosevelt era. So he was the one that was doling out the contracts and working out all of the paperwork and the logistics that created the military-industrial complex from 1947 through the 1960s. And it was he who was appointed to head NASA, which gives you an idea of how militarily, industrially complex the NASA organization is.
Absolutely. Okay, what I wanted to also do was talk about the Vatican, and so that we can also circle back to this notion that
Yes.
And possibly talk about your understanding of how the Vatican has been 10 years.
Well,
trying to
I'd like to talk more about the last 50 years. The United States intelligence apparatus was infiltrated by Nazis who have hijacked it and Nazified our government. That's the way I see it. In the same way, the Catholic Church was infiltrated and was taken over. And here I'm expressing not just my view, but that of somebody far more knowledgeable than I, former Jesuit Malachi Martin said that Lucifer has taken over the Catholic Church, and it started in 1959. And he spoke bravely, courageously about it, openly, and no one believed him. Until now, we look back at the last 10 years in retrospect and see the exposure of all the crimes of pedophilia and the hiding of really perverse behavior by Catholic priests, by the former Pope, Ratzinger,
well,
and others
can I
before
stop
him.
you right there, because that also gets into who
Yes.
the whole back to the Anunnaki and
Yes.
Marduk.
Yeah.
So when are
Well, there's no reason. Well, yes, of course. Don't you remember who the villain is in Battlestar Galactica? Yeah,
well,
that's science way back in the 80s.
yeah,
And
but
it was they were fighting aliens who had artificial intelligence, and the leader of the aliens was called Lucifer.
oh, was he?
And that's
Okay.
what he may very well be,
Yeah.
a form of extraterrestrial alien artificial intelligence.
Yes.
People ask me, when I talk about Lucifer and Satan, people say, believe in that? I say, what do you call Lucifer? I said, Lucifer is intelligent, and Satan is passion without reason. They're both destructive.
Okay.
By intelligence
You broke up there. Can you?
I said that when I talk about Lucifer's characteristics, it's intelligence without love. And that's the kind of intelligence that looks at people simply as numbers and digits. These are people like Eichmann, Adolf Eichmann. He had an intellect that was really brilliant in organizational skills. And he had this ability to collate numbers. And when he saw numbers, he just saw numbers. He didn't see people. And we have that meant obvious. Prime example is when you read the report from Iron Mountain. Everything that we see unfolding around us today was described in the early 60s. In a book. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah. The minute you started,
I am here.
The minute you started to talk about the Iron Mountain report, you broke up. And
well,
but can you repeat it, please? Try to repeat it.
Sure. I would say that the mentality that I'm describing, this Luciferic mentality, which is it's unhuman. Pure science. When they get to that stage where you divorce your humanity, for America to be brought down in its standard of living in order to bring up the standard of living in the third world, and that the wars would not fought. I
Robert? It's very strange. My connection is fine at this moment. Robert's is static.
Other, but that it would be
Robert?
5.
Would it help, Robert?
There's surrogates.
Robert, can you hear me?
In the term called brush fire wars.
Robert? Hello? Robert? Hello?
I see it.
Robert?
Here.
Robert, I'm going to call you back. Okay? Action, can you hear me? Robert? Also known as Arthur. Robert.
Hello?
Hi.
Yes. Hi.
Okay, you really were breaking up terribly. So back. I think perhaps.
I heard you complete. I never lost contact from you. They just cut me off.
Okay. What I'd like you to
I'm
do.
on another computer now. Can you hear me?
I can, but I think you should keep your off.
Okay.
Could you keep your camera off?
Yep.
And that way your audio will come.
Okay.
Talking about the Iron Mountain report, I'd like to continue.
Yes, I'm just saying that these events that we are going through right now were pre-planned 30, 40 years ago in order to bring about this so-called New World Order. The New World Order is the schematic for the New World Order is in the book or the report from Iron Mountain. Everything, the shifting of industries overseas, behavior modification. I see we're having trouble again.
No, you're getting a delayed.
Oh,
You're,
okay.
you're
All right.
back on.
Okay. So this is the point: is that these things are not happening by chance. They have been planned for a very, very long time. Um, Social engineering and behavioral modification are an integral part of applied mind control. Every day we see the nation being manipulated emotionally and psychologically, pushing us in a certain direction of greater and greater conformity. I pointed out that the JFK assassination, a couple of shows I've been doing, the JFK assassination was the first act of global terrorism that the world has ever known. It was an event that shook every part of the world except China, where it was not announced. And I believe that the basis and the purpose, besides getting rid of President Kennedy and his agenda to free the American people from the Federal Reserve and to open up disclosure, change the economy, the main purpose was to traumatize the nation as the principal factor necessary to conduct trauma-based mind control. As you know, trauma-based mind control is what the Manchurian Candidate idea is all about, to traumatize a person, split the personality, and into that split personality to insert an alter or a sleeper, and to manipulate that person to commit acts that they would not ordinarily do or commit. Now, interestingly enough, the earliest form of mind control, or the earliest description of mind control that I have come across, is actually in Islam. And it's the legend, or the history of the old man of the mountain, Hassan al-Sabeh. He was the progenitor of the assassin concept, the mind control that he applied to his Hashashim. Hashashim is the term for the assassins that he would send out to kill political leaders or rivals. And that was a form of mind control that was developed around the year 1000 in Persia. And from there, and Persia, as you know, is Iran. So they have the oldest body of mind control, operant mind control, that I've come across in relation to the Western world. Older than that is Buddhist mind control that spread from Tibet through China and ultimately reached its fullest expression in Shinto Buddhism of World War II Japan.
I have to say that most religions, the way they operate,
Yes,
these are
sure.
so you could look at the education.
Yeah.
This isn't
Patterning, patterning.
to think.
You
Yeah,
know, one
this
of the
this is
things
mind control.
I
Education as well.
um I came into paranormal research, occult research, because I was psychic all my life, and so I gravitated to psychology, but in particular toward parapsychology because I feel that parapsychology is the key to developing the mind, the human mind, to the highest level possible, and that involves direct communication with higher spiritual beings, be they angels or God. And I have succeeded. I've had my experiences. My experiences with God have been in near-death experiences where I had the privilege of speaking to God and asking him not to take me at that time for certain particular reasons. Not that I was afraid to go, it's just I just didn't want to die in front of certain people. And so I was spared. And other things that have happened, and that's an outgrowth of parapsychology. But when I was engaged in my initial training in psychology, American parapsychology was in the Dark Ages. And I found that the Chinese culture, and especially through training in Shaolin Kung Fu, where I experienced Buddhist training, and then in Tai Chi, where I experienced Taoist training, that they are very powerful forms of mind control for self-development, not for self-subjugation.
Right.
See? And
Yes.
it's important for us to believe in our own spiritual nature. We were talking about the multidimensional nature of our existence, and one of the things I like to point out is that we are nested in many dimensions. We have a mental dimension, we have the physical dimension, sensorial, tactile, we have the emotional dimension, and all of these, you can think of them as bodies. Your mental body, emotional body, your physical body, and your field of your chi field, your field of life. And we live in them simultaneously, but we seem to pay attention to only one of them at a time. You know, doing some housework, you hit your finger with a hammer trying to drive a nail, and you go, ah! And all you can think about is like, oh my God, it's the body. You know, and then another thing, somebody will rile you up. Somebody will rile you up, and you just can't think about anything else except, you know, the conflict. And then what happens? Food doesn't taste good. Can't sleep. You know, you have low energy. You're distracted in everything you do because of the conflict. And until you resolve the conflict, you're kind of bound by it. So all of these things are elements that require us to have a certain amount of willpower. And I think that the most important form of mind control is you controlling your own mind and breaking your own conditioning. And that is something that I had to do over many decades of time. And I had to study with many different teachers to break patterning. One of the best ways to break patterning is to do something physical, because the mental pattern imposes physical and behavioral patterns which are in themselves limitations. So when you break out of the physical limitation, your mind is relieved of the conflict that was causing the physical limitation. That's the idea underlying Tai Chi, that the body is the solid or perceptible part of the mind, and that it's an act of will. I change my mind, I change my position. I wish to reach over here, extend my arm, and pick up these papers and bring them back to me. That was first initiated by the idea, which turned into will, which initiated the muscular coordination to take those papers and draw them to myself. An act of will. By the same token, another element acts upon our bodies to give us our shapes. And one of those is the subconscious self-image. What you think of yourself in your subconscious mind is the shape that your body will take in its external appearances. Mm. So in Tai Chi, we work on this idea of arriving at the true self-image, because society is distorting all of us at all times, from fashions to fads, you know, to foods, we're being manipulated, and that affects our forms. So Tai Chi, I like to describe it as the user's manual for the human body. And you buy any gadget, any machine, you get a user's manual, but this body, you don't get it. Your user's manual is your nationality and your ethnicity that impose the ethnic imprint or the national imprint upon you. And so studying with the Druids for 8 years in England, the chief Druid taught me how to break my patterns. You know, what are patterns? A pattern is taking the same route every single time you take a drive to go someplace. So
well, actually, thank you for that.
that's one. That's one pattern. Easy one to break. You just decide, okay, today I'm just going to go a little different way.
Well, actually, absolutely. Unpredictable things. Humanity is the reason why we will.
I've also found that the people who are most fanatical are usually people who speak only one language. And then another way of breaking out of patterns and the grip or the hold that a belief system or a nationalistic idea may have on you is to learn another language and to learn another map of reality, because that's what language is. Language is a map of reality. It is not the reality itself. And yet people are killing each other over words, semantics, and they may not even know that they are using different words for the same thing, and they're fighting over the words.
Yeah, exactly.
Fighting over the common idea and ideals that they may share.
I find. Uh, Robert, we've been going for.
Okay.
But what I'd like to do is.
Sure.
And just before we. Also, because we were right when we were about. That before we.
Well, I do have something. I said it before that I saw a change occur in the Catholic Church from the early 1960s, from 1963, where the Second Vatican Ecumenical Council took over and just changed the church from top to bottom.
Well, what about, rather than repeating that, what about what's going on? Sites or any some moves.
Well, other than his pushing for basically liberation theology and a communization of the Catholic Church, um, I I don't foresee really much happening. What I do foresee happening through the Catholic Church is the impetus toward disclosure. I think that the Catholic Church is the best organization, the best prepared organization to deal with the adjustment that will be required of humanity, uh, to acknowledge the existence of the extraterrestrial presence and its intervention in our affairs. And I would point out that it's happening very rapidly. I've been waiting for about 40 years to see a movie called Childhood's End, and right now it's going to be aired very soon.
It's airing right now.
It's airing right now, and for people who don't know the novel, basically the novel Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke is about the revelation of the extraterrestrial presence in our lives, its interaction and intervention in human affairs, but the final manifestation. And it takes 50 years in the book, it takes 50 years for humanity to be prepared for the revelation of their form. The motherships come over the cities, world, globally, And they just park themselves there for 50 years and they give directives, and everybody stares at them for 50 years until everybody's used to them. And then
you do know that rather than give the story, know that the ultimate.
yes, indeed it is. It also is, it's a prophetic vision of the assimilation of all consciousness into one huge field of consciousness or awareness. But it's interesting that it's happening now. Again,
Sure.
it's a monumental novel. It's one that I've read 3 times. I don't read many books 3 times. That is one that I did, and it's really worthwhile.
And you know that he was read in.
Oh, yes, I am aware. Arthur C. Clarke was a big honcho in in that field of philosophers. You know.
Absolutely. Okay, so
They congeal into reality. The change in our reality is happening in the, well, let me call it the antimatter state. See, antimatter is spirit. If it's not material, what is it? It's not material. So matter and antimatter are interacting, and we are oscillating from a material state to an antimatter state, and it's in the antimatter state that ideas can change the relationship between fields of force, energies, atoms, so that they are reaggregated in a slightly different form when we blink in the next time. That's my belief. So, you know, change, the idea of changing something, it's not changing the material aspect of it, it's changing the ideas around it that are keeping it in that form. And that's a really esoteric concept to have.
yeah, back again to. And you know, thoughts get embedded in your physicality. I
Because it
think.
takes a lot in physics. Hello?
Go ahead.
I'm here, but I'm getting an interruption. Yeah. I'm still.
Okay, Robert, we're gonna close down. Um, Perhaps give some.
We lost the connection.
Uh, we are online right now. I can see us. It is still working. So wrap up comments.
Can
We'll
you
close
hear
this
me?
down. I can hear you fine.
Oh, okay. Uh, I would caution everyone to be very careful about people or organizations trying to manipulate your belief system. Um, I would. I'm very aware that every day I see the news manipulating our emotions, in particular CNN. Uh, Images are flashed upon us. One of the just be careful. Everyone is after your head, including ISIS. But the inside of your head is what people are after. And I think that we have to be very careful about religious ideas in particular, and how religion may be manipulated to alter your behavior from the natural to the unnatural. Be careful and aware of anyone who raises your anger for any reason, and try to keep a cool head and try not to be afraid of anything, because really nothing can harm you. That's the message I got.
That's lovely. Thank you so much for coming on. Fascinating discussion. Sorry for the interruptions that we had. File this. I will put it
Okay.
on. Okay.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Okay.
Happy holidays. Merry Christmas.
You too.
Have a happy New Year.
Yes, and to all the viewers.
Okay. This rhythm of the universe is actually a pulse of life, which was generated at the beginning of time and streamed out and continues to stream out into the universe, propagating life and light and life wherever it reaches. And it has not reached its ultimate destination. In the Christian world, these ideas are as alpha and omega. The alpha point being the beginning of time, the creation, and the omega point being that toward which the universe is moving, striving, evolving. Now, when we come to the recent history, that's cosmic history. Recent history, as I look at the world today, it's by each manipulating their followers into a belief system which excludes all the others. Now, these religions, the three main religions that I'm talking about, are Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And in each of these religions, I discern intervention of celestial beings that are called angels, devils, demons, watchers, sons of God, fallen angels, and individual names as well. And I believe that all of these entities are operating in a cosmic war, vying for the earth as a resource and for humanity, our minds and our souls, domination of our thinking, imposition of alien ideas upon our humanity that is making us less like us and more like them. In each of the religions, I discern an alien intervention. We use the term extraterrestrials. It means not of terra, extra terra, out of this world, not of this earth. And I propose that angels, demons, jinns, God himself is an extraterrestrial. Ghosts are extraterrestrial. All of them are part of a multidimensional existence that shares the same space but not at the same time. That's why I was referring before to this beat, this intermittent beat, this on of one generation is the history of another. And the history of another civilization evolves into the religion of another civilization. There's a molting process in ideas, and each tries to understand the world, both the material world and the mystical world, in concepts that are most familiar to them. So tonight I want to discuss ET origins of religions. I would like to begin at the beginning, which is, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth was void and without form. And God said, "Let there be light." The question is, where was God standing? Obviously, he wasn't standing on solid ground. My answer is that the Creator created the universe from another dimension, and that creation process is what we call the Big Bang. But there was an antecedent state to the Big Bang of light of the universe, which was a singularity. Um, the way I describe the universe before the creation of light is an infinite expanse of nothing, of darkness, that had no other attributes other than a certain different density in one region of the universe. Call it a lump in the dark. And from this point, this lump in the dark, universal pressures were generated that kindled a fire. And that fire was being suffused by a counter force until the forces both grew so great that they could no longer stay or remain in that antecedent state. And at that point, there was a rupture in realities. From another dimension, there streamed into these dimensions an energy flux that had consciousness, awareness, will, intention, identity, and this universe began to unfold. But it is a multidimensional universe with an intermittent nature to its beat. And
Okay, this is Carrie Cassidy and Robert Morningstar, and we're about to start. As usual, I've had some anomalous things going on with one of my computers here, so I've had to switch computers. We're starting here and going live. We've had some interesting anomalous things go on right before the start of the show. Not sure why. My other computer is not working properly, so I had to go to this computer. The angle is a bit strange, so it's one of those situations where I need to raise it up and all that kind of stuff, which I'll do while I get you talking, Robert. So Robert Morningstar is, the editor of UFO Digest, and I believe he's quite well known at this point. I've had him on several shows, and I guess a writer, an investigator into the Kennedy assassination. I think that's one of the things you're most known for. Um, and rather a sort of specialist in some ways when it comes to, I guess, uh, I don't know, occult knowledge and perhaps the Illuminati. I'm not sure how you'd classify yourself. So, Robert, why don't you give yourself an introduction that is much better than the one I just gave you while I shift things around
Oh,
here?
I thought that was a good one. Thank you. Um, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Robert Morningstar. I'm an investigative journalist and a radio reporter. I have an expertise in several fields. One of my principal tools in investigation is use of geometry, sacred geometry, and geometrical analysis and proofs. Most of my work in the Kennedy assassination involves geometric proofs. For example, that the skull X-rays are not President Kennedy's, which has been proven by other experts, including Dr. David Mantik, or most notably Dr. David Mantik. I study history, mythology, psychology is my field, and it's been my vehicle expanding my consciousness and trying to understand this world in which we live. And a large part of that is studying the relationship between, because the mythology and off fluctuation, a flickering reality. That is what I believe. We're here, and then we're not here, then we're back, then we're not here, then we're back, and only in that uh, intermittent binary state can things unfold. If things were constant, everything would be static. There would be no motion. But it's only because the universe fluctuates from the material to the immaterial that we see change happen. And the change, the real change, occurs in the interaction of ideas and energies in the non-material state, which cause small changes that make the world congeal in a slightly different form the next time it's on. So this is my idea of the intermittent universe.
Okay,
We are,
Robert, I appreciate
yeah,
that, and thank you for that. No, I think
right,
you lay that out very nicely. Let me say that at this
for
moment,
time.
it's just crazy, and why this is going on like this, I don't know. I do want to say that that people might have missed what we just talked about, and I don't know. Um, I'm trying to see if maybe from the chat if someone can put into the chat where how long we've been gone because we did get knocked off.
Are we back on now?
Yes, we
Okay.
appear to be online again. Um, so what I had done was addressed what Robert had said in regard to this sort of phenomena of blinking in and out, and the notion that we are as multidimensional, actually blinking out of this reality and into another one when we appear to be blinking in and out as physicists see us or see this timeline. So we are moving between timelines and dimensions simultaneously, and all time is simultaneous anyway. So you have to work that into your sort of concept about what's really going on here. And when we talk about religion, I guess this is no other. There's it's a perfectly valid place to to start that kind of a discussion. Robert, you and I had just started this conversation as I was telling people, and we were talking about the Kennedy assassination. He was on his way to Dallas, and according to my witness, Mark Richards, was actually going to spill the beans at that conference in Dallas where he was about to
That's
do a
trademark.
speech.
Yes. Yes, I have heard that many times from several different sources. I've heard that he shared the contents with Governor Connolly, and that he was planning to reveal the extraterrestrial presence on operating on the planet at that speech, and that was the single most important reason why he had to be stopped from giving that speech. Since we're talking about President Kennedy and UFOs, I'd like something that's very, very interesting. President Kennedy was a member of the Office of Naval Intelligence, and during World War II, as everyone knows, he was stationed on PT boats. Now, despite the movie, they were expendable with PT boats going out and sinking cruisers and battleships and all of that. In reality, the PT boat was more a spy vessel than anything else, and that was what President Kennedy was involved in at the time of PT 52 and PT 109, 109 being the more famous of the two. But the important thing is that President Kennedy was stationed on Guadalcanal, and it was around the waters of Guadalcanal that he had his disastrous shipwreck when his PT boat was cut in two by a Japanese destroyer that didn't even know it had hit him in a totally black moonless night. But the interesting thing is this, that I discovered about 10 years ago. The people of Guadalcanal, for over 100 years, have had this local legend of something called the dragonfish. The dragonfish is a light, a brilliant light that is seen to come out of the waters and go into the waters around the northern end of Guadalcanal. And from the waters, it moves into the highlands of Guadalcanal. And natives that have been brave enough to go chasing them have often come back injured. They are hostile. They were hostile. And the legend of the dragonfish has been in and around Guadalcanal for 100 years. And I believe that is where President Kennedy may first have had experiences with UFOs. The second experience that President Kennedy had with UFOs was being briefed 2 or 3 days after the Roswell crash about the event, the findings, the craft, the alien bodies. And for this reason, he was put on a watch list by the Central Intelligence Group of the United States Army. He was put on the list as people who had learned of the event without having been cleared to know about the event. Are you still there?
Yes, I am. Please
Okay.
ignore. Apparently, my camera's not working now on Skype. So
Okay.
just normal craziness going on in the behind the scenes here. Continue.
Oh, sure. Let me tell the audience, UFO Digest has been knocked off the internet for the third time this year. And it's very curious that the last time that we were knocked off was the day after I had published